Good afternoon. I'm Father James Forge, the youngest brother of Mary Ann. I have the privilege of welcoming you and thanking you for your attendance. Just as a reminder that might be in need, there are restrooms, 2 of them, men and women's, through that door and to the left with the men's at the far end. I want to begin by acknowledging Mary's younger sister, Teresa Neeson, and then Mary and Tom's daughters, who are present, Laura Teague, Diane Furry, Carol Hopkins, and their spouses, George, Carl, and Carl. To their son, Stephen, who on behalf of his siblings will give the first tribute to their parents, and to his spouse, Teresa. Finally, I'm happy that so many of the grandchildren and even great-grandchildren in growing number are here. I feel quite certain also that Mary and Tom's eldest son, Christopher, is with us using his own special streaming device. An equal welcome, of course, to those who are attending from a distance by YouTube. Mary Ann's brother, Maurice, from Toronto. Emile Joseph in Atlanta. And to Martha, the youngest of our 6 siblings, who is in San Antonio. Her daughter, Cindy, is with us in person. With them, both in person and online, are members of groups who meant so very much to Mary Ann and Tom. There are some members from the Mass that they attended regularly in this chapel for about 20 years every Saturday. There are members from the tradition, the wonderful retirement home where Mary and Tom lived several years, and a special welcome to Bonnie, one of their great friends. Finally, members of the running community with whom Tom and Mary shared so much of their lives. As you can see in the order of service, we will begin with tributes, first of all, by a son-in-law, and a member of the Houston running community. I would like to invite first then Stephen McBrayer to come up to the mic.
Thank you all for joining. I'm Stephen McBrayer, 4th child and 2nd son of Tom and Mary Ann. I want to thank you all for joining us in this celebration of their lives on what today would be their 66th wedding anniversary, September 21st. Growing up in the latter half of the siblings, I have nothing but fond memories of the household our parents created for us. So many wonderful qualities that now, looking back, we try to emulate and carry forward into our own families. If I could summarize it in 3 words, it would be church, home, and family. Church, first and foremost, I want to thank our parents for raising us up in Christianity. Our local church, St. Christopher's, was really at the core of our lives, spiritually, socially, and educationally. We all attended St. Christopher's from K through 8, went to Mass daily, often in Latin, and on weekends, attended social events and athletic events. Mom was homeroom mother to not one or two of our homerooms, but one year she was homeroom mom to all 5 of our homerooms at the same time, as well as being president of the Ladies Club. Being organized was one of her strengths, and I remember the neighbor moms always calling her Super Mom, and rightfully so. Our dad helped lay brick on some of the newer buildings in the parish hall, and we were constant volunteers for parish fundraisers and festivals. At home, I have so many vivid recollections of our home on Moline Street in Southeast Houston. Our house was really the epicenter of Park Place gatherings. At only 5 kids in our household, we were one of the smaller families in our Catholic neighborhood, which many families had 9, 10, 12, or more kids. It was not uncommon to have dozens of neighbor kids in our backyard playing on our slides, glides, swings, and zip lines. For our family, I've come to realize that growing up in the McBrayer family, we were forged by some extremely wise, though very unpopular, decisions amongst us siblings. Decisions that were years and often decades ahead of their time. I'll give you a few examples. I remember taking many bike rides with my dad around the neighborhood and often to the public library. While we were looking for books to check out, my dad would head straight to the reading room where he would peruse the latest newspapers and magazines, as he was a prolific reader. One of his favorite magazines was Consumer Reports. One particular edition rated the best cereals for children. As it turns out, Cheerios was deemed the healthiest. My dad decided right there and then that this would be the only cereal served in our household. Now, this is not Honey Nut Cheerios. This is just plain Cheerios. But when you're an 8-year-old kid and all your friends are eating Count Chocula and Fruity Pebbles, plain Cheerios was totally lame and loathed by all of us. But as it turned out, a pretty wise decision. Seat belts in the US weren't mandated for passenger vehicles until 1968 for new cars. However, my dad didn't wait for us to get on that bandwagon. I remember him pulling out the carbide bit and drilling holes into the frame of our Ford LTD station wagon and installing his own seat belts. Who does that? My dad did that. So here in Houston, a city of millions of inhabitants, there were at least 7 people using seat belts, although extremely begrudgingly. Again, it turns out a wise move and far ahead of their time. All the men in my father's family died in or before their 40s. My grandfather died at the age of 47, and his many uncles and generations of men before him died before their time. Sometime after my dad got married and before he turned 40, he made a conscious decision to change that. He gave up smoking, started practicing yoga long before there were any yoga studios. He became a vegetarian in the 70s. Now, being a vegetarian in the 70s in Texas, that was like being a communist or fascist. But he was confident in his decision, and he didn't care what others thought. As you all know, he started running laps around the YMCA, which was acceptable. Soon after, he transitioned to jogging around the neighborhood, which was not acceptable. One neighbor stopped my mom and asked if my dad was okay, meaning she thought he was mental. But there was one thing crazier than a man running around the neighborhood in the 1970s, and that was a woman, as my mom soon joined him jogging around the neighborhood. Yoga, vegetarianism, running are all cool now. 50 years ago, not so much. So they were truly a half a century ahead of their time. I'm also so grateful to our dad for teaching us to be resourceful and handy. We rarely, if ever, had a repairman in our home. And he did it all, and our garage made Home Depot and Lowe's jealous. He had every nut and bolt imaginable and categorized in coffee tins aligned on the garage wall. A used toaster never made it to the landfill. It was disassembled, all the springs, electrical cords, and other parts torn down and reused in some other project. His legacy lives on today. One of our sons was on a caravan road trip in West Texas. One of the cars got a flat tire, and the guys in the car do what all kids do today. They pulled out their phones and looked on TikTok and YouTube on how to change a tire. Only one problem: there was no internet or cell connection out in West Texas. So they all panicked. Fortunately, there was a McBrayer kid on that trip, and he knew how to change a tire. My grandfather died at the age of 47. My dad passed away at 94. He did reverse the family patriarchal curse, and he doubled his life, all in one generation. He not only lived longer, but healthier, happy, and whole. In Psalm 91, God makes a very bold promise to us all and tells us, "For those that dwell in my shelter and love me, with long life will I satisfy you." And they did dwell in him and loved him, and with long life they were satisfied. And they taught us so much along the way, and we are so forever grateful for all their love and all that they taught us. Thank you.
Nice job, Stephen. Hi, I'm Carl Furry, and I'm married to Tom and Mary Ann's middle daughter, Diane. She's right there. I've been asked to talk about Mary Ann, but with these two, you can't talk about one without really talking about both of them, so that's what you're going to get. It was 42 years ago that I first met Tom and Mary Ann. I had been dating their daughter, Diane, for a couple of months, and she brought me home to meet the family. Tom and Mary Ann were so different from anyone I'd ever known. Here I was, this cheese-fed, couch-raised kid from Wisconsin. I'd never met anyone who would voluntarily get up at 4 a.m. and run 8 to 12 miles in the dark before breakfast 6 days a week. And suddenly I was looking at not one of these strange, exotic creatures, but two of them. It seemed to me that at any moment they might sprout wings and fly away. And I guess now they have. Tom and Mary Ann were devoted to each other in a way that I'd never seen before. They weren't effusive people, yet they were openly affectionate, always on the same page about everything, each always thinking of the other. In later years, it was so clear how Mary Ann cared for and protected Tom as his memory began to fail. And in their final 17 months after moving to Austin, all they really wanted was to be together until the end. And they were so disciplined. The running regimen, their healthy lifestyle, their business, every facet of their lives showed a dedication to doing the wise thing, the smart thing. These were impressive people, and they were intimidating to me. They got so much done every day while the rest of us were at home watching television. Or I'm really speaking for myself, but a few of you must know what I'm talking about. Come on. You're not all marathon runners. That discipline was on full display the first summer I knew them. They were gathered in the backyard on Moline for some family event. I think it may have been when Mary Ann graduated from U of H. And Tom, all 140 pounds of him, was sitting in a chair with a pair of shorts on, and he didn't have a shirt on. And Mary Ann pointed to this horizontal crease across his abdomen and claimed it was evidence of Tom's perennial beer belly that she insisted he would never lose. And I looked at Mary Ann, and I looked at Tom and his abdomen, and I looked back at Mary Ann and thought, lady, you need to either visit an optometrist or a psychiatrist because you're seeing things. When you weigh Mary Ann's forceful, always in control personality against Tom's more easygoing nature, you could be fooled into thinking that Mary Ann really called the shots in the marriage, but you would be wrong. She respected Tom too much to boss him around, and the truth is, once their kids moved out, her life was very focused on caring for her husband. Marianne didn't travel nearly as much as she wanted to because Tom really wasn't interested in traveling, and she didn't want to leave him alone. In truth, they rarely spent a night away from one another until later when illness separated them. Marianne was generally soft-spoken, and yet she had a handle on everything. She organized our wedding 38 years ago and ensured we pulled the whole shindig off for just a hair over $3,000. Even back then, that was an accomplishment. At times, it seemed she could do anything. In fact, she was so capable that to this very day, our daughter Samantha and her husband Austin, when faced with a tough situation, they will find their way through it by saying, "Let's Marianne McBrayer this thing." True story. Both Marianne and Tom were reliable and knowledgeable mentors for their kids, and they raised those kids with patience and thoughtful guidance. They taught their children to do the right thing, as Stephen was saying, to be considerate toward others, and to take care of themselves and their families. They raised 5 kids, who among them produced 5 grandkids and 1 great-grandkid, and there isn't a clinker in the bunch. Those grandkids, Samantha, Reed, Kelly, Kevin, and Keith, brought out the best in both of them. Tom especially loved to play with our granddaughter, his great-granddaughter, whose name is Harper Valentine. Tom wanted to be woken up whenever she was around. Watching them play one day, Marianne turned to Diane and said, "Daddy really loves that baby." In case you don't know, Tom was supposed to die first. That was always their expectation. That was their plan. But as the old saying goes, you make a plan and God laughs. This time, God's chuckling may have felt a little mirthless because those final months were rough. They were rough on Marianne and Tom, and rough on Diane, Laura, Stephen, and Carol, and on Marianne's siblings, and honestly, the whole family. Still, Marianne remained her obstinate self, still dedicated to squeezing the absolute most out of this life. She insisted on hosting a monthly Zoom call with her siblings, which she kept up until the very end. Despite her failing lungs and other terminal conditions, she kept hanging on long after she probably wanted to, because Tom was still in the bed next to her, and they could still feel the warmth of the other's hand in theirs. I'll just close with this. Marianne actually held 2 beliefs about the afterlife, which I always found fascinating and interesting about her. And some might feel that these beliefs may conflict with one another. I don't. She believed that in the Christian heaven, but she also thought reincarnation might be possible as well. And recently I started thinking, if she's right about reincarnation, that this life that just ended for her and Tom was just one in a string of lifetimes that stretch on for eternity, how lucky we all are that our lives all lined up together at the same moment across the boundless expanse of time. How lucky we all were that we were here when they were here. Thank you.
My name is B.J. Allman, and I met Tom and Marianne when I joined Houston Master Sports Association, the running club that they fostered. That's a song from the musical Rent, and I happened to hear it when I was thinking about how I would pay tribute to Marianne and Tom. When you're thinking about how you measure a year in the life, it quickly became apparent to me that I'm not measuring a year in the life, I'm measuring decades of dedication to the Houston running community. It's interesting that the lyrics in that song use the term measure because Tom and Marianne became experts on how to measure a running course. That's done on a bike, usually in the middle of the night between 2:30 and 4:30 a.m. when you don't have to worry about the traffic. Tom measured more than 600 courses, and he also certified more than 3,000 in the state of Texas. Now you think all the times we were asleep, Tom and Marianne were out there in the middle of the night measuring courses. Marianne learned about measuring too, but she did something else that I thought was very commendable and shows why they were such an outstanding couple. After Tom recuperated from a bike accident where he broke all the bones in his pelvis, Marianne became concerned about him being out there measuring courses. So she drove her car behind him on his bike when he was doing this between 2:30 and 4:30 a.m. And she told me, I had his back every mile of the way. That really shows you the dedication of a couple. McBrayers decided to share their expertise and train others how to measure courses. So they started a newsletter to send out. And then they also worked on a video in which Tom gives a step-by-step demonstration of how to measure a course. If you're curious, it's still on YouTube. Search for course measuring video. It's about 15 minutes long, and it will make you appreciate the behind-the-scenes work that goes on to ensure that the length of a course is accurate. Now, fortunately, all the work that they did on this field was not gone unnoticed. They were the first recipients of the Ted Corbett Award presented by USA Track and Field's Road Running Technical Council to honor contributions to the field of course measurement and certification. Now, Tom and Marianne's interest in this was something they pursued to stay involved with the running community when knee problems forced them to stop running in the early 1980s. What they did for Houston's running community prior to that isn't as easily measured in numbers, but the benefits to Houston's running community are readily apparent in some of the facts I'm going to share. Tom started running in 1966 at age 36 when he transferred to a desk job and was worried about gaining weight. He eventually convinced Marianne to take part in this sport as well as something they could do together. Marianne said this was a good decision because it helped keep her sane raising 5 teenagers. The duo became part of a small group of recreational runners, and when they went to Memorial Park to run, there was no trail. They just had to run on grass, and the repeated laps that they took on the grass eventually turned into a dirt path, and then they became advocates for the park to install a running trail, and they did that successfully. And when the trail was put in, then they became advocates to have lights installed to keep the trail safe for running at night. Again, successful at that. When Marianne began to run, there were very few women runners in Houston. They competed in races that had no category for women, so they had to sign up in the men 17 and under category. Now that didn't sit well with Marianne, so she wrote a letter to the track and field officials and convinced them to put in a category for women. She said it took a while before that category expanded to include the open and masters female winners, and then eventually they put in age groups as well. But she was successful. Tom and Marianne were inaugural members of the Houston Marathon, and they volunteered for the marathon more than 25 years, including its first year, 1972, which was run at Memorial Park. Tom ran that marathon, and the McBrayers family station wagon served as the turnaround point on the 5-loop course. The McBrayers were among the 6 people inducted into the inaugural Houston Marathon Hall of Fame for their efforts in making the event so successful. Tom and Marianne were also inaugural members of the Houston Area Road Runners Association, also known as Hurrah. They volunteered at Hurrah races, and Tom served as custodian of the Hurrah equipment to make sure race directors had everything they needed to run a race. The late Bill Hadley, who was a good friend of the McBrayers, said there were many Hurrah committee meetings when someone would say, "Call Tom and see what he thinks about that." When Tom was honored with Hurrah's Above and Beyond Award, Marianne said Tom and Bill Hadley have, over the years, put in more collective hours of service to the running community than anyone else in Houston. Now we're going to hear the word inaugural again. Mary Ann and Tom were inaugural board members of Houston Masters Sports Association when Don Slocum founded the club in 1974. Don soon departed from the club, and Mary Ann and Tom took over the administrative duties, including writing and publishing a monthly newsletter for over 35 years. They also kept track of membership roster, payment of dues, scheduled meetings and social events, and maintained the club's website. Houston Masters is now 50 years old. Michael Luna, who's with us today, is in his 12th year as president, and he follows in the footsteps of Joanne Luco, who's also here, who served as president for 14 years. Both Michael and Joanne were able to consult Mary Ann and Tom whenever they had questions about club protocols or how to do something. In 1986, Tom and Mary Ann came up with the idea of a warm-up series for the Houston Marathon. There were 3 races, a 20K, a 25K, and a 30K, that were spread out over the last few months of the year to help runners increase their mileage as they trained for the marathon. The 20K was later replaced with a half marathon. The 25K is managed by Houston Masters, and this year will be the 39th running of that race. Over the years, Tom and Mary Ann volunteered at many races and encouraged others to do the same. Mary Ann said, "When something becomes so much a part of your life and you can feel so much benefit from it, it seems only fair to give in return. There probably are a lot of people who would volunteer if they were asked, but the sport needs you to just do it, to just step up on your own." The McBrayers have been called the godparents of Houston running, the ultimate behind-the-scenes dependables, and the first couple of Houston running. I like to think of them as the pioneers of Houston running, as evidenced by the inaugural that appears in a number of the awards they got and the boards that they served on. The late Bill Hadley, who died a few days after Tom, had an explanation on why Mary Ann and Tom were so successful at working at events and serving on committees. He said Mary Ann was a persuasive leader and a diplomat, while Tom was known as being a stickler for details, as well as someone who's adept at promoting goodwill between the running community and others, such as the police department. Brant Koch, who is with us today too, worked with Tom and Mary Ann when he was director of the Chevron Houston Marathon for many years, and he was quoted in a Houston Chronicle article about the McBrayers. He said, "Every person in this city who has laced up a pair of running shoes and run in a race here, any race, owes a tremendous debt of gratitude to Tom and Mary Ann." Kathy Mayon, a former president of Hurrah, posted this statement on Facebook after Tom and Mary Ann died. "They were an awesome power couple, irreplaceable, really. We need to keep their memory and accomplishments alive." Now, speaking of memory, the opening line of the song September by Earth, Wind, and Fire asks, "Do you remember the 21st night of September?" Well, on this 21st day of September, I'm asking you to remember Tom and Mary Ann whenever you're running on the trail at Memorial Park, or you're pounding the pavement during the Houston Marathon or the 25K or any other race that's on a certified course, or you're registering in the women's division of a race, or you're volunteering at a Hurrah event, or enjoying any other aspect of Houston running that was made possible by Tom and Mary Ann. In that spirit of memory and extreme gratitude, when Houston Masters hosts this year's 25K on November 24th, the race will be dedicated to Tom and Mary Ann and to Bill Hadley. As Kathy Mayon said, we need to keep their memory and accomplishments alive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those wonderful, beautiful tributes. We're about to hear an anthem sung by the trio with organ. I thought because of the echo in the room, it might be best if I read the lyrics first before they play and sing. This is an anthem by Herbert Howells and with lyrics by Robert Bridges. My eyes for beauty pine, my soul for God's grace. No other care nor hope is mine. To heaven I turn my face. One splendor thence is shed from all the stars above. 'Tis named when God's name is said. 'Tis love. 'Tis heavenly love. And every gentle heart that burns with true desire is lit from eyes that mirror part of that celestial fire. We will now listen to two readings from the Holy Scriptures. The first reading I ask from Anne Neeson, daughter of Teresa.
A reading from the book of Proverbs. When one finds a worthy wife, her value is beyond that of pearls. Her husband, entrusting his heart to her, has an ever-failing prize. She brings him good all the days of her life. She obtains wool and flax and makes cloth with skillful hands. She rises while it is still night and distributes food to her household. She picks out a field to purchase. With her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She is girt about with strength, and sturdy are her arms. She enjoys the success of her dealings. At night, her lamp is undimmed. She puts her hand to the distaff, and her fingers ply the spindle. She reaches out her hands to the poor and extends her arms to the needy. She fears not the storm for her household, as all of her charges are doubly clothed. Her husband is prominent at the city gates as he sits with the elders of the land. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She laughs at the days to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. On her tongue is kindly counsel. She watches the conduct of her household and eats not her food in idleness. Her children rise up and praise her. Her husband, too, extols her. Many are the women of proven worth, but you have excelled them all. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
For the second reading, it will be by Jane King, the niece of Tom McBrayer.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans in chapter 6. Are you not aware that we who were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Thus, through our baptism into his death, we were buried with him, so that, just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might live our lives in a newness of life. And so, if we have been united with him through a likeness to his death, so shall we be united with him through a like resurrection. The word of the Lord.
For the song response, I ask you to look program and repeat after the cantor, my shepherd is the Lord, nothing indeed shall I want, and then repeat it with the cantor after each verse.
My shepherd is the Lord, nothing indeed shall I want. My shepherd is the Lord, nothing indeed shall I want. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Fresh and green are the pastures, where he gives me repose. Near restful waters he leads me, he revives my soul. My shepherd is the Lord. prepared a table before me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil, my cup is overflowing. My shepherd is the Lord, nothing indeed shall I want. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell for length of days unending. My shepherd is the Lord, nothing indeed shall I want.
In our first reading from the book of Proverbs, we heard a marvelous depiction of a worthy wife whose value is said to exceed that of pearls. We heard of the husband who, entrusting his heart to her, knows that he has an unfailing prize. As we then heard of her different skills and virtues, and how her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband, too, extols her, saying, "Many are the women of proven worth, but you have excelled them all." The tributes to Mary Ann and Tom that we heard a few moments ago could be added to the description of wife and husband in that beautiful reading from Proverbs. This morning, several members of Tom and Mary Ann's family gathered in Forest Park Cemetery to inter the ashes of their mortal remains. While praying, I sprinkled water over them, over the ashes, over the urns. This is because, as we just heard in the reading from St. Paul's letter to the Romans, it was with water that many of us were baptized, not only into a new life, but also into the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In other words, just as Christ's death had no hold over them, so their death has no hold on them. Their lives are radically changed, but their lives are not ended. As Catholic Christians who came weekly to Mass in this chapel, Mary Ann and Tom clung to the belief that their souls, the spirit that animated their bodies, that enabled them to know to do, to love. That spirit, their souls, now live on with Christ risen from the dead. We who believe know that already their souls live on in the merciful and loving embrace of God. We close with prayer and then singing. And so I ask you please to stand and begin to pray together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory of forever. We pray with confidence then to God, in whose sight all creation lives, that God may embrace the spirits of Tom and Marianne and commend them to be numbered among the blessed. May God grant them a merciful judgment. May Christ, the Good Shepherd, carry them home to live in peace with the Father. May Marianne and Tom rejoice forever in the presence of God and in the company of all the saints. Amen. If you wish to join in singing the closing hymn, there are hymnals in a little niche above your, under your seat. There are hymnals. We will use the number 689, 689, verses 1, 2, 3, and 6. 689, verses 1, 2, 3, and 6.